If you've checked your total testosterone before, that might not be enough. And if you've never had your testosterone levels checked, you want to make sure you watch this video. Or if you just want to understand how testosterone works and kind of what levels we might want to look at labs, make sure you keep watching. So I'm Dr. Abraham, and I specialize in men's health, especially like hormonal health and testosterone. And over the years, I've helped countless men transform their lives by transforming their hormones. So let's talk about testosterone and why total testosterone does not give you the whole story. And I see that all the time. People come in and they say, I've checked my testosterone with my physician and they said everything looks great, but I still feel like crap. I don't feel good at all. And there could be a couple reasons why that might be the case. But today specifically, we're going to talk about specifically if they've only had their total testosterone, why there might be some missing information in there. Let's start by talking about what total testosterone is. Total testosterone is the complete amount of testosterone that's running in your body. But the reason this is not the whole story is because a big portion of that total testosterone you can't really do anything with. So let me give you an example. Say you have all that testosterone in your body. All of these are testosterone molecules and they're running in your bloodstream. Well, here's a problem. A big portion of these is going to be bound to other proteins. So this is going to be bound, and then some of it is going to be free. So free testosterone is great because it's not attached to anything and it can go around your body and do what testosterone does. It can go and find the testosterone receptors in the different organs of the body and go to them and signal, what your body is trying to do with testosterone. However, when something is bound, then it's already attached to another molecule, and that's going to restrict its availability, which is why we have also something called bioavailable testosterone, which I'm going to talk to you about in a second. But that there's a molecule called the sex hormone binding globulin, and this is basically a big protein that comes and picks up all these testosterone molecules. And so even though your testosterone, your total testosterone is high, if your SHBG is high, then what's going to happen is you're going to have more testosterone that's bound and you're going to have less free testosterone. And again, the bound testosterone you can't really use the same way you can use the free testosterone. Now, some of that bound testosterone is also bound to albumin, which is a different protein that's in your body. There's a small portion that's also bound to other proteins like the cortisol binding globulin, but that's a very small percentage. So today we just want to focus on SHBG and albumin. Especially SHBG, because again, like we said, if SHBG is too high, even if your total testosterone is normal, if you have too much SHBG, that means you have a higher percentage of that testosterone that is going to be bound and all and kind of like not available. So in other words, let's say you have two people who have, testosterone of 750, but one person has normal, you know, SHBG, and so they have normal free testosterone, while another person is going to have really high SHBG. So even though they have the same total, their free testosterone is going to be lower. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, that's why we have something called free testosterone that we check in lab, and that's also there's something called the where we look at the free testosterone and then we look at the percentage of testosterone that's free to see is that like 1%, 2%, 3%. So we look at the free testosterone, and then we look at the percentage of testosterone that is free. Now, like I said, the amount of SHBG in your blood is gonna play a role. Albumin does too, but when albumin binds testosterone, it doesn't hold to it as strictly as SHBG. So in other words, SHBG really grabs that testosterone and doesn't want to let go. Albumin does grab the testosterone, but it's not as it's not as strong of a bind as SHBG. So sometimes we look at something called bioavailable testosterone, which is different than free testosterone. So bioavailable testosterone is a little bit different because it looks at the free testosterone, plus it also looks at testosterone that is bound to albumin, because again, albumin is able to let go of some of that testosterone kind of if needed, so that you can use it on all your testosterone receptors in the body. Because, and the reason I keep saying testosterone receptors is the reason you have testosterone is a hormone. So it's going to go to all your organs, let's say to your muscles, for example, and there's going to be receptors where the testosterone is going to attach and tell the muscle, hey, I'm here, I'm testosterone. Let's grow. Let's do all of the things that we want to do, all the reasons we want testosterone in our body. But if it's bound, it cannot do that. So when you look at your total testosterone, that is helpful. That's the number that we look at all the time. But again, it's not the whole story, because another, arguably more important number is going to be your free testosterone. Because again, if you have $1 million, but $950,000 of it is tied up and you can't really use it, and you can only use that other 50,000 that's left, then in a sense, when you're outside, you can only shop with 50,000, even though technically you have $1 million in your account. If 950,000 of it is not something that you can use, then it doesn't matter once you're in the store and you're trying to buy something and you only have that $50,000 available. Same thing here. If you have this large number of total testosterone, but all of it is tied up and cannot be used, cannot be active, then really the free testosterone is what matters. Now, are those all of the labs that we want to look at? Now, there are a few other labs I can mention briefly, but those are some of the most important ones. But let me mention just a couple other things that usually you might want to look at when you are looking at your testosterone to see the full picture. So the first thing we've mentioned again is going to be your total testosterone. Another important lab we're going to look at is free testosterone, which again we've already mentioned. And then we want to make sure we look at the SHBG, which is a sex hormone binding globulin, and even we can look at albumin, because those two, especially this one, are gonna bind to your total testosterone, which is gonna decrease the amount of free testosterone available. You can even calculate bioavailable testosterone. And again, your bioavailable testosterone, your free testosterone are really gonna be a better measurement of the testosterone that your body can use. Now, other labs that we can look at is going to be your estrogen or estradiol sometimes. And the reason we look at estrogen because testosterone can also, some of it is going to convert to estrogen. That's a whole different topic. We'll have a different lecture or video, I should say, about the difference between testosterone and estrogen. We'll have a different video about the relationship between testosterone and estrogen. But for now, some of testosterone is going to convert to estrogen. And a lot of the symptoms that we feel are not just about testosterone, it's about that testosterone and estrogen balance. So if you have a good amount of total testosterone, even a good amount of free testosterone and bioavailable testosterone, but you have a really high estrogen for your health, then this is going to have its own negative side effects. And vice versa. You also want to make sure your estrogen is not fully depleted. You actually need an healthy amount of estrogen in your body, and both males and females need healthy amounts of estrogen and healthy amounts of testosterone. Now, what's healthy testosterone for a male can be very different of what's considered a healthy testosterone for a female, and same thing with estrogen. A healthy amount of estrogen in male is not going to be the same amount of estrogen that a female is going to need. But we both need both, even though it's at different levels. Sometimes you can look for at other things like LH, FSH, and sometimes things even like prolactin the first time we're checking for testosterone. The reason is because these numbers can affect the testosterone production, and it can help us figure out that if there is a problem, where's that problem coming from. So for example, LH, it's luteinizing hormone, and it's a hormone that's produced it starts in our brain and it goes to the testicle and it stimulates certain cells to produce testosterone. So LH is the signal molecule that leads to testosterone production. So the reason that can be helpful, if you look at LH and FSH in some of these other labs, if we have low testosterone and also low LH, that we know the problem is coming more from here. Versus if we have normal or even high LH but low testosterone, we know the problem is coming more from here. It's coming. So this part is working, but then this part is not working. This is also why you get your labs. Ideally, you're talking to a health provider who can really understand your labs and explain the situation a little bit more for you in terms of exactly what's working in your case and what's not working. Because if you really want a full picture, now that it's complicated, but there are multiple parts of it, multiple parts to it. And again, it's not just like, oh, your testosterone is this number, so you're good. Your testosterone that number, so you're not good. You have to really understand a few things. And again, at least understanding your total testosterone and what your free testosterone is, and knowing what your SHBG is gonna help you understand again where your free and where your bioavailable testosterone is. It's also very helpful to know where your albumin level is. And again, I always, when I check the hormone level on my man patients, I always kind of want to know what the estrogen is doing too, especially if you are gonna, if you are gonna try to increase their testosterone, because we also want to see if their estrogen is also gonna increase or if it's gonna stay the same or how it's gonna change and if we have to do something to keep that estrogen in check. So total testosterone, free, albumin, bioavailable, estrogen, SHBG. All of these are very important, very helpful. And this is why when you get a testosterone check, you want to make sure that you're looking at multiple numbers. You want to make sure that you're talking to somebody, your provider, who can explain all of these numbers for you and give you a full picture, especially if you started by doing that total testosterone and kind of the labs don't match the symptoms. So in other words, if you were told that the labs are normal, but you still have all of these symptoms that you cannot explain or we're not sure why you have, you're just feeling tired, you don't have the energy, the focus, the motivation, and you try to check the total testosterone and that did not give you the whole picture, then you want to make sure you look at a more full panel to see if there's something more that we can find. Hopefully you found this useful and it kind of helps you understand the picture a little bit more. Make sure you like and subscribe. And yeah, thanks for watching.